The unexpected encounter. The first thing Jake noticed when he woke up was the cold. His body was pressed against a smooth, metallic surface, and he felt an odd sense of weightlessness. His mind swam with confusion as his eyes flickered open. This wasn't his bed, and this certainly wasn't Earth. The walls around him shimmered with a strange blue light, unlike anything he had ever seen before. The air had a faint metallic smell, mixed with something unfamiliar, something alien. Panic surged through him as he tried to sit up, but his limbs felt heavy. His clothes, he wasn't wearing any. His heart skipped a beat as the reality of his situation hit him. He was completely exposed, bare, alone, on some foreign ship in a vast, unknown universe. Sweat trickled down his forehead, and he instinctively tried to cover himself with his hands, his body shaking from the chill and the fear. Where was he? How did he get here? A sudden rustling sound broke through the silence, and Jake froze, straining his ears. He wasn't alone. He could hear footsteps echoing softly, and then, as if summoned by his fear, a figure appeared from the shadows. A woman. No, not just any woman. She was tall, graceful, and her skin glowed with a soft, otherworldly radiance. Her eyes, bright and intense, fixed on him, studying him with an unreadable expression. She wore an elaborate robe of shimmering fabric that moved like liquid light, trailing behind her as she stepped forward. Jake's breath caught in his throat. This was no human. This was something else entirely, something beautiful, yet alien, something that sent a jolt of both awe and fear through him. She didn't speak at first. She simply stood there, watching him with her penetrating gaze. Jake could see the crown. On her head, a delicate piece of metalwork that gleamed with mysterious symbols. His eyes widened with realization. This wasn't just any alien, this was royalty. Where am I? Jake stammered, his voice barely above a whisper, his throat dry. His words echoed in the silence of the room. The princess's lips parted, but instead of answering him, she tilted her head as though trying to understand something. She stepped closer, her eyes scanning his bare body, making him feel even more exposed and vulnerable. For a moment, the only sound was the steady hum of the ship's systems. Jake could feel his heart pounding in his chest, every instinct telling him to run, to escape. But where? There was nowhere to hide. This was a ship, an alien ship, and he was at its mercy. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the princess spoke. Her voice was soft yet commanding, echoing in his mind. "You are aboard the starship Zaran, the vessel of the Janari Empire," she said, her words smooth and measured. "And you are here. Because of me?" Jake blinked, trying to process. Her words. The Janari Empire? He repeated, confusion thick in his voice. Who are you? What do you want with me?" She didn't answer him immediately. Instead, she seemed to study him closely, her gaze lingering on his face. The silence stretched again, thick and uncomfortable. He could feel the weight of her stare, like she was trying to peer into the depths of his soul. "I am Princess Kalira, of the Janari," she said at last, her voice calm, yet there was an undeniable power in her words. "You were chosen, brought here for a purpose." Jake's mind raced. Chosen? Purpose? His thoughts were a blur, each word she spoke digging a deeper hole of confusion. "But I didn't choose this. I don't even know how I got here." The princess's expression softened, and for the first time, Jake saw a flicker of something other than cold command in her eyes, perhaps curiosity. She stepped closer, her bare feet making no sound against the ship's surface. "You were brought here by the will of the stars," she said, almost to herself. "Our people have waited long for this moment." Jake's chest tightened. He didn't know what she meant, but something in her words felt important. like it had meaning far beyond his understanding. He swallowed hard. "What do you want from me?" She looked at him, and in her gaze he saw something he hadn't expected, a strange mixture of pity and determination. "Not what you think," she said quietly. "You are not the prisoner here. I am." Her words hung in the air, heavy and cryptic. Jake's confusion deepened. How could she be the prisoner? She was the one who was free, who commanded the room, who had power. And yet, her words made him wonder if she was hiding something deeper, something that even she didn't fully understand. The princess turned her back to him, walking toward a console embedded in the wall. As her fingers danced over the surface, the ship's walls flickered, revealing holographic images of distant stars and far-off planets. She seemed lost in thought, but Jake's mind was elsewhere, trying to make sense of everything that was happening. He could feel her eyes on him, even though she wasn't looking directly at him anymore. It was as though she was waiting for him to figure something out, to ask the right question, or perhaps to understand something that was yet to be revealed. But all Jake could do was stare at the princess, still unsure of his place in this strange new world surrounded by mysteries. With only her enigmatic gaze to guide him, the ship hummed around him, and the weight of what was happening settled in his chest. He was no longer just a man alone in space. He was something more. And wherever this journey was taking him, it was only just beginning. Asterisk, an unlikely connection. Jake's mind buzzed with questions. But before he could ask another one, the princess turned, her gaze locking onto his. "You have many questions," she said, her voice carrying a strange calmness. "But all will be answered in time." Jake's heart skipped a beat. He didn't want to be patient. He needed answers now. "Why am I here?" he asked again, this time more forcefully. "What? Does any of this have to do with me?" The princess remained silent for a moment, as if weighing her response. Then she spoke, her words slow but deliberate. "I know you do not understand, but you will." She paused, watching him carefully. "You are not here by chance. You have been chosen." Jake's brow furrowed. Chosen for what? He had no special skills, no unique talents. He was just an average guy, someone who had no business being in space, let alone on an alien ship surrounded by royal beings. "But why me?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. She stepped closer to him, her movements graceful but purposeful. "Because your presence here is the key to something far greater than you can imagine." She seemed to hesitate, as though deciding whether to say more. "There is an ancient prophecy, one that speaks of a human, a stranger, who will alter the fate of the Janari Empire. You are that human." Jake blinked, struggling to grasp the weight of her words. A prophecy? Alter the fate of an empire? This was madness. But even as disbelief settled into his thoughts, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this, truth buried beneath her cryptic words. "I'm just a regular guy. I don't know anything about prophecies." "Or empires," Jake said, shaking his head. "I don't even know how I ended up on this ship, so why are you telling me this?" Her eyes softened slightly, a rare flicker of vulnerability passing across her face. "You are not meant to understand everything right away, but this ship, this journey, will change you. It will change us both." She reached out gently, touching his shoulder, and for a brief moment, Jake felt a strange warmth spread through him. It was not the warmth of affection, but something more primal, like the spark of a connection that couldn't yet be explained. He was still confused, still scared, but there was something about her that kept him from pulling away, something that made him feel less alone. The princess stepped back, her gaze distant, as though lost in thought. "You must understand," she continued. "I cannot simply tell you everything. The Janari Empire is vast, and there are forces at play beyond even my control. If the wrong people find out about you, about your presence here, ... She trailed off, as if the words were too dangerous to speak. Jake could sense the gravity in her tone. Whatever was happening, whatever had brought him here, it was more complex than he could ever have imagined. And yet, there was still that unshakable feeling in his gut that he wasn't just caught up in a series of strange events by accident. There was a purpose to it all, something he was destined to play a role in. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say anything, a sharp beep echoed through the room. The princess turned quickly, her body tense. A warning light flashed on the wall beside the console she had been manipulating earlier. "No," she whispered under her breath, her expression hardening. "They've found us." Jake's heart raced. "Who's found us? What's happening?" The princess didn't answer immediately. She was already moving, her hands flying over the controls, her face set in a determined expression. "I have to prepare the ship for emergency maneuvers," she said quickly, her voice colder now, as though the warmth she had shown him just moments ago had vanished entirely. "Stay here. Do not move." Jake wanted to protest, but he didn't. There was something in her command that made it clear this was no time for questions. He watched as she worked, her fingers gliding over the controls with swift precision. The ship around him seemed to hum louder, the air charged with an almost electric energy. Whatever was happening, it was serious. He had no idea what was going on, but one thing was clear. His connection with the princess had just taken a dangerous turn, and as much as he wanted to know more, he realized that the answers he sought might not come easily. In fact, they might cost him more than he was ready to give. A low rumble shook the ship, followed by a sudden, violent jolt. The walls around him flickered, casting eerie shadows across the room. The princess didn't flinch. She remained focused, her movements quick and calculated. Jake, on the other hand, was shaking. The ship's alarms blared, and his mind raced with 1,000 questions. But the most pressing one was, what had he gotten himself into? Before he could ask another question, the princess turned to him, her face grim. "We have to move now," she said, her voice low and urgent. "We've run out of time." Jake's heart pounded in his chest. This was no longer just about getting answers. Now it was about survival. And as the princess led him down the corridors of the alien ship, he couldn't help but feel that whatever came next would change the course of both their lives forever. Asterisk, the bond deepens. Ship shuddered violently as the warning sirens blared. Again, and the air seemed to vibrate with an urgent energy. Jake's heart raced as he followed Princess Kalira through narrow corridors, her pace unrelenting, leading him deeper into the heart of the alien vessel. The walls flickered with neon lights, casting unsettling shadows on the smooth, metallic surfaces. Everything felt alien, unnervingly so. "Where are we going?" Jake asked, trying to catch his breath. He wasn't used to running, especially not in a situation like this. "What's happening? Who's after us?" A princess didn't answer immediately. Her sharp, focused eyes were locked on the path ahead, and Jake could tell that whatever was going on was serious. "There is no time to explain everything," she said, her voice strained but determined. "The Empire's enemies are closing in on us. I have to make sure you're safe." Jake's mind spun. The more he heard, the more it seemed like his accidental trip to this alien ship wasn't just a mistake. He was part of something much bigger, something that involved this strange, powerful woman who was doing everything she could to keep him alive. But why? Why was she so determined to protect him? "I don't understand," Jake muttered, shaking his head. "You're a princess. You're in charge here. You should be the one leading the fight, not running from it." Kalira slowed for just a moment, her eyes flickering to him, her face a mixture of frustration and sorrow. "If it were that simple, I would," she said, her voice softer now. "But I cannot fight this battle alone. There are forces within the Empire, within my own family, that wish to see me fail. And if they find out what you mean to me, what? You represent ... Jake's stomach churned with unease. What was he to her, exactly? Why did she seem to care so much about keeping him safe? He wasn't anyone special. Just a human caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Kalira continued walking briskly, her eyes darting back and forth as they rounded corners, heading deeper into the ship. The panic in her movements made it clear that the situation was getting worse by the second. Jake struggled to keep up, but as they entered a larger chamber, the princess halted abruptly. She turned to face him, her eyes wide and intense. "Listen to me, Jake," she said, her voice fierce, but filled with a vulnerability he hadn't noticed before. "You must trust me. There is no one else who can protect you. No one else who understands the gravity of the situation like I do. This ship ... the people on it, they are not what they seem." He could see the strain in her eyes, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. It wasn't just about royal duties or her empire. There was something more personal here, something she wasn't telling him. Her breath was shallow as she spoke, her hands trembling slightly as she clenched them into fists. "I don't know who to trust anymore," she whispered, almost to herself. Then she turned to him again, her gaze firming up as she met his eyes. "But I know that I can't let them take you. You're too important." Jake didn't know what to say. He couldn't understand why he was so important to her, why she cared so much. But in that moment, he saw something in her, a raw human vulnerability that made her more real to him. She wasn't just some untouchable alien princess anymore. She was someone who had real fears, real concerns, just like him. "I don't know what's happening, but I'll trust you," Jake said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "I don't know what role I'm supposed to play in all of this, but I'm not going to let you face it alone." Kalira's expression softened for the briefest of moments. It was a look of relief, something fleeting that vanished almost as quickly as it had appeared. She nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "Thank you," she said quietly, but the gratitude in her voice was undeniable. "That means more to me than you know." Before Jake could respond, the ground beneath them trembled again. A loud screeching sound echoed from the hallway behind them. The ship was under attack. He could feel the shift in the atmosphere. Hum of the ship growing louder as alarms screamed in the distance. "Come on," Kalira shouted, grabbing his arm and pulling him along. "This way. We don't have much time." They rushed through the ship, winding through tight corridors that seemed to close in on them. The walls shimmered with frantic lights, casting eerie shadows that danced with every turn. The tension between them was palpable, but now Jake felt a strange sense of solidarity. He wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was part of this. Kalira led him to what appeared to be the ship's command center, a large circular room with walls lined with screens and control panels. It was chaos. Crew members hurried back and forth, shouting commands, their alien voices echoing off the walls. But as soon as Kalira entered the room, everything fell silent. "Princess." "Kalira," one of the crew members said, bowing slightly. "We've detected enemy ships closing in. We must prepare for battle." Kalira's eyes narrowed as she stepped forward, her regal composure snapping back into place. "I know. Prepare the ship for evasive maneuvers," she commanded, "and make sure that no one touches the human." The crew member hesitated, but nodded, clearly nervous about her orders. As the room buzzed with activity, Jake could feel the weight of her words. He was no longer just a bystander in this strange world. He was part of something much larger, a fight he didn't understand yet, but one he had to be ready for. Kalira turned to face him, her eyes sharp with a determination he hadn't seen before. Stay close, she warned. You may not know what's happening, but you need to trust me. We have to get out of here, or everything is lost. Jake swallowed hard, his heart racing. He had no idea how things would play out, but one thing was certain. He was no longer alone in this alien world. And whether he understood it or not, he had a role to play. The bond between him and Kalira had deepened, and whatever was about to happen next, he would face it with her. Secrets revealed. The ship's alarms continued to blare, and the low hum of its systems seemed to pulse with urgency. Jake could feel the ship's movements becoming more erratic, as though it was being shaken by the incoming enemy ships. Kalira's pace never faltered, her hands steady as she adjusted the controls in front of her, issuing orders with precision. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, she commanded, her voice calm but sharp, betraying no sign of panic. Deploy the shields on the lower hull and reinforce the main engines. We can't afford to lose speed. Jake watched as the crew scrambled to follow her instructions, their movements swift and practiced. But in the chaos, his mind was on one thing: Kalira. The way she moved, the way she commanded the ship, it was all so natural to her. It was hard to imagine this beautiful, composed alien woman as anything other than royalty. But something about her demeanor, the way her hands trembled slightly as she worked, made Jake realized that even she wasn't immune to the weight of the situation. Princess, Jake spoke cautiously, his voice cutting through the tension. What exactly are we running from? Who's attacking us? Kalira didn't look up from the console, her fingers moving faster now, the bright, flickering lights reflecting in her wide eyes. For a moment she didn't answer, her expression set in a mask of concentration. But then she sighed deeply, as though the weight of her secrets had become too much to bear. They're not just enemies, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. They're assassins sent by my own family, my bloodline. Jake's eyes widened. He had assumed that the princess's royal status had made her untouchable, that her position protected her from such dangers. But now it seemed her status was exactly what made her a target. Assassins? He repeated, feeling the chill in his chest. But why would your family want you dead? Kalira's jaw tightened, and for the first time, Jake saw a crack in her otherwise perfect composure. Her hands stopped moving on the console, and she turned to face him, her eyes filled with a mixture of defiance and sorrow. My family, she began, her voice colder now, has always been driven by power. My father, the Emperor, is a man, consumed by control. He never trusted me. He thought I was too weak to lead. But there are others in my family, others who want the throne. They believe that with my removal, they could seize control. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he processed her words. A political struggle. A royal betrayal. It seemed like something straight out of a storybook, but here she was, living it. So they're trying to kill you to take over? Jake asked, his voice edged with disbelief. But why bring me into this? I don't have anything to do with your families. Politics. I don't even know who you are, Kalira. The princess didn't immediately respond, her gaze drifting to the window as if she could see the vast expanse of space beyond the ship. The stars stretched out in every direction, an endless sea of possibilities, and yet she was trapped in a battle she couldn't escape. I'm not entirely sure, Jake, she said, her voice quieter now, tinged with frustration. But I believe the prophecy my people spoke of, that the arrival of a human someone like you was meant to change everything. Jake frowned, the weight of her words pressing down on him. You're saying that I'm part of some prophecy? But I'm just a guy who woke up naked on your ship. I don't know anything about prophecies. Kalira's eyes met his, her gaze intense, and for the first time, she looked almost vulnerable. You don't understand. The prophecy is about A human who will either save or destroy the Shannari Empire. I believe that you are the key, Jake, that you have the power to change the course of my people's future. Jake felt a lump form in his throat as he tried to process what she was saying. He was the key? To what? To saving an entire empire? He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a warrior. He was just a man thrown into a galactic struggle that he didn't understand. But why me? He asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. I didn't ask for this. I don't even know how I ended up here. I don't want to be part of your political mess, Kalira. I just want to go home. Kalira's expression softened, and for the briefest moment, Jake saw the weight of her own internal struggle. She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't ask for this either, Jake. I didn't ask to be caught in this web of lies, power, and betrayal. But now that you're here, we have no choice but to face it. Before Jake could respond, a sharp bang echoed from the ship's hull, followed by a violent tremor. The lights flickered and went dim, casting the room in shadows. The alarms blared again, more urgent now. Get to the escape pods, Kalira ordered, her voice firm once more. We don't have much time. They're boarding. Jake's heart skipped a beat. Escape pods? He didn't have time to argue. The ship was under attack, and the princess was right. There was no time to waste. Kalira grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the exit. The panic in her eyes was gone, replaced with the cold determination of a leader who had no choice but to fight. But as they moved through the hallways, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the truth Kalira had just revealed was only the beginning. Whatever role he had to play in her empire's future, it was far from over. And now, there was no turning back. Asterisk, betrayal, and escape. The ship shook violently, once more as another blast hit the hull, and Jake barely managed to keep his balance. He gripped the wall for support as the alarms blared louder and the flickering. Lights grew dimmer with each passing second. The noise was deafening screams, metallic clattering, and the deep rumble of machinery under stress filled the air. Kalira's grip on Jake's arm tightened, and she tugged him forward with urgency. We need to move now, she shouted, her voice drowned out by the chaos around them. They dashed down narrow corridors, their footsteps echoing off the sleek, polished walls. Jake's mind was racing, his thoughts scrambled. He had been thrust into a world of alien politics, deadly prophecies, and now it seemed full-scale war. He had no idea who to trust or what was happening, but one thing was clear. The danger was real, and if he didn't keep up with Kalira, he would be left behind. Another explosion rocked the ship, and the floor beneath them buckled. A section of the wall collapsed, sending sparks flying into the air. Kalira didn't flinch, though Jake could see the tension in her posture, every movement sharp and deliberate. She was no longer the composed princess he had first met. Now she was a woman fighting for survival, her royal persona stripped away, replaced by a fierce determination. Stay close, she barked, leading him toward a hidden door at the far end of the corridor. It opened with a soft hiss as they approached, revealing a darkened passage beyond. Kalira glanced back, her eyes scanning the hallway for any sign of pursuit. Are we safe here? Jake asked, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he followed. Her inside. For now, Kalira replied curtly, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. But it won't be long before they catch up with us. The ship's internal defenses are compromised. The door hissed closed behind them, plunging them into darkness. For a moment, all Jake could hear was his own heavy breathing, mingling with the distant sounds of the ship's turmoil. Kalira's silhouette was the only thing visible in the dim light, filtering through the cracks in the walls. She stepped forward, her fingers brushing over a control panel embedded in the wall. Where are we going? Jake asked, his voice low. What happens next? Kalira didn't answer immediately. She was focused on the control panel, her fingers moving with precision as she entered a series of commands. Finally, she looked up at him, her face unreadable. "We're going to the escape pods." "It's our only option," she said, her voice tinged with a sense of finality. Jake nodded, though unease churned in his stomach. The escape pods? Wasn't that where people went when everything else had failed? They weren't supposed to be used unless the ship was doomed. As they moved deeper into the passage, the sound of footsteps echoed behind them, and Jake's heart skipped a beat. They weren't alone anymore. The enemy had found them. Kalira's expression hardened, and she grabbed Jake's arm again, pulling him toward a narrow opening in the wall. "This way," she urged, her voice low. "We can't risk being caught." They sprinted through the darkened corridors, every step more frantic than the last. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and Jake's pulse quickened. Whoever was after them was close, now too close. Just as they rounded a corner, a figure appeared in front of them, blocking the way. Kalira froze, her eyes locking on the figure with a look of sheer disbelief. "Xander," she murmured, her voice a mix of shock and anger. The man standing before them was tall, with dark hair and a cold, calculating gaze. His uniform was black, adorned with silver insignia. He was one of Kalira's own guards. But his stance, his expression, it spoke of betrayal. "What are you doing here?" Kalira demanded, her voice sharp. Xander's lips curled into a smirk, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm here to ensure that you don't get away, Princess," he said, his tone smooth, almost mocking. "Your escape has been anticipated." Jake's mind reeled. "You're working with them?" he asked, disbelief creeping into his voice. Kalira's eyes flashed with anger. "You've betrayed me, Xander," she spat. "I trusted you." Xander took a step forward, his hands resting casually at his sides. "You trusted the wrong people, Princess. And now you're going to pay the price for your foolishness." Jake's muscles tensed. This wasn't just an attack on the ship. This was a personal betrayal. The people Kalira had trusted, people who had been by her side, were now her enemies. But the question still hung in the air. Why had Xander turned on her? What was his real agenda? Kalira's eyes narrowed as she assessed the situation. "Get out of my way, Xander," she said, her voice colder now. "You're making a mistake." Xander shook his head, his smirk widening. "I don't make mistakes, Princess. I'm following orders. You're not leaving the ship, not alive." Tense silence fell between them, the air crackling with tension. Then, without warning, Xander lunged, a blinding flash of movement. Kalira reacted instantly, stepping back and drawing a concealed blade from her side. It shimmered with a faint blue glow, a weapon that looked as lethal as it was beautiful. Jake's heart raced as he watched the two of them clash. Xander's attacks were swift, but Kalira moved with the grace of someone who had been trained for moments like this. The sound of metal against metal rang through the corridor as they fought, each movement a calculated strike, a parry, a thrust. Jake stood frozen, unsure of what to do. He had no weapon, no training. He was just a human caught in the middle of a battle he didn't understand. He wanted to help, to do something, but the fight between Kalira and Xander was too fast, too dangerous. Finally, Kalira's blade found its mark, and Xander stumbled back, clutching his side. Blood seeped through his fingers as he glared at her, his face twisted in fury. "You'll regret this," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "You can't outrun the Empire." Kalira didn't respond. Instead, she turned to Jake, her face hardening with resolve. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice steady despite the battle they had just survived. "We need to reach the escape pods now." Jake nodded, his mind still reeling from the betrayal he had just witnessed. The princess wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting against her own people. against those she had once trusted. And now, with Xander wounded and the enemies closing in, the escape wasn't just an option. It was a matter of life and death. Asterisk. A new beginning. The escape pod chamber was located at the far end of the ship, deep within the bowels of the vessel. It was a silent, cold place, dimly lit by the soft glow of emergency lights. Jake could hear his own breath as he hurried to keep pace with Kalira. The adrenaline still coursed through him, his heart racing. But now, a new sense of determination filled his chest. The betrayal, the chaos, it had all led to this moment. He couldn't run anymore. He couldn't pretend that. None of this mattered. Kalira's sharp, commanding presence kept him focused. But Jake couldn't help but feel the weight of their situation. They had fought their way through the ship. Xander's betrayal still lingered in the air, a painful reminder that there was no one left to trust on this ship except for each other. "They'll be coming for us," Kalira said, her voice calm, but urgent as they approached the pod. "We need to leave before the reinforcements arrive." Jake looked at her, his mind racing. What's going to happen when we get out there? What happens next? The princess's eyes flickered to the escape pod ahead, her lips pressed into a thin line. "We don't have the luxury of knowing what's next. We just have to survive, and then we can decide. Together, together." The word hung in the air between them, an unspoken promise. Jake had never signed up for any of this, but now, after everything they'd been through, he couldn't deny the bond that was forming between them. Whether they liked it or not, they were in this together now. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that he wasn't just a pawn in her struggle. He had a choice. The door to the pod chamber slid open with a quiet hiss, and they entered the stark, sterile room now filled with a sense of finality. In the center, a sleek escape pod stood, waiting for them. The soft hum of the pod's systems seemed oddly comforting in the chaos that had surrounded them. Kalira moved toward it without hesitation, her steps graceful, determined. But as Jake followed her, he felt something inside him stir a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since his life had been turned upside down. "Are you sure about this?" Jake asked, his voice low. "Are you sure we're not running away from something we can't escape?" Kalira paused at the entrance to the pod and turned back to him. For the first time since he'd met her, her expression softened, the hardened mask of royalty slipping just enough to show the woman beneath. "I don't know what will happen once we leave the ship," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "But staying here on this ship is worse. I'm not running away. I'm taking control of my destiny." Jake stepped forward, closer to her. "And mine?" Her eyes met his, searching for something in him. "Yours too." They didn't have time to dwell on the weight of her words. The moment stretched between them, a delicate thread pulled taut by the danger around them. Kalira quickly boarded the pod, and Jake followed suit, the hatch closing with a soft click behind them. As the pod's engines hummed to life, Jake felt a strange mix of fear and hope. There was no turning back now. The ship, the galaxy, they were all changing, and whatever came next, he would be right there with Kalira, sharing the uncertainty and the risk. He was no longer just an accidental traveler in space. He had a role to play. He didn't know what it was, but he knew he wasn't alone. "We're heading to a planet on the outer rim," Kalira said, her voice steady again, giving him a direction. "A place far from the Empire's reach. We'll lay low there. There are people who can help us." Jake glanced at her, trying to make sense of everything she had said, everything that had happened. "What about the Empire? What about your family?" Kalira didn't immediately answer. Her fingers flew over the control panel, and the pod began to rise, moving slowly at first, then gaining speed. "I don't know if I'll ever go back. If we can't make it there, then I won't return. But if we can, we have a chance to rebuild." to change everything. Jake didn't know how he could help her with that, but as the pod shot through the hull of the ship, its exterior lights flickering like distant stars, he realized that he had already become a part of her fight. The escape pod burst out of the ship, hurtling into the open space beyond. Stars stretched out before them, an infinite sea of light and darkness, waiting for them to navigate through it. As the pod accelerated toward the unknown, Jake turned to Kalira, his mind clearer than it had been all day. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice more certain than before. "We'll make it." Kalira's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, her shoulders relaxing as she sat back into her seat. For the first time, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Together," she agreed. The pod moved silently through the void, and Jake couldn't help but feel that, somehow, this was just the beginning. Whatever the universe had in store for them, they would face it side by side, navigating the unknown together. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Jake felt ready to embrace it. Asterisk.